Okay, so let's just dive right in. We're starting this deep dive with a conflict that I think really defines a huge part of modern entertainment. Mm. We are all completely captivated by reality television. You know, the messy relationships, the drama, the meltdowns. But at the same time, I think almost every single one of us knows deep down that most of what we're watching is manipulated.
It is. It's manufactured.
Yeah.
And in a lot of cases, it's genuinely harmful to the people we're watching.
Exactly. It's this ultimate paradox of how we consume media today.
It really is. The audience is so sophisticated now.
Yeah.
You know, you can recognize the signs of exploitation. You can spot the heavy editing, the contrived scenarios.
You know it's not quite real.
You know it. And yet, we're still drawn to it. So our mission today is to really pull apart the mechanics of that whole spectacle. We want to get into the infrastructure of information control.
That's right. We've got a deep stack of sources here that are going to help us explore the engineered nature of reality. We're going to track the whole process right from the moment a participant signs that very binding contract.
All the way through to the producer's secret playbook in the edit room.
And then we'll land on the psychology of why the public apology, that thing we see all the time now, why it so often just falls flat with this really cynical social media-driven public.
Yeah, we're going to try to uncover the production techniques they use to generate drama, the legal leverage the networks hold over their stars, and then, you know, the precise psychological reasons why, when a public figure posts that tearful, remorseful video, our gut reaction almost universally is just, that's fake. We want to understand the control mechanisms that are used to make us believe in the authenticity of something that is, at its core, completely artificial.
And here's the paradox we have to wrestle with right out of the gate. How can a show genuinely try to adopt policies that are, you know, kind to participants, offering support, aftercare, all that?
All the things they say they do now.
Right. And at the same time, still be entertaining for viewers when the ratings and audience behavior just consistently show that viewers, well, they seem to enjoy seeing people suffer, or at least seeing them in extreme emotional distress.
That tension.
Yeah.
That's the whole game right there.
The tension between empathy and entertainment. That's really the crucible where modern media integrity is being tested.
And that tension is exactly where this deep dive has to begin. It's the core paradox of our enjoyment. The data shows that socially conscious audiences, you know, they're hyper aware of exploitation. They read the articles, they hear the stories from former reality stars.
They know it's a problem.
They know it's a problem, yet the shows that lean most heavily into chaos, distress, outright humiliation, those are the ones that achieve absolutely massive success.
It's this incredible disconnect, isn't it, between our stated ethics, this desire for fair play and mental health awareness, and our actual quantifiable viewing habits. I think we need a case study here to really show the human cost versus the commercial game.
Okay, let's take the latest season of Married at First Sight UK.
Yeah.
It's a huge international franchise. And there was a lot of public pressure on the producers to, you know, clean up their act, offer more robust psychological support.
Right, the duty of care conversation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But what happened? That specific season, which was driven by some of the most intense personal conflicts we've seen, it celebrated record-breaking ratings. We're talking an average of 2 million viewers an episode.
Yeah.
It was one of its most successful seasons, but also one of the most chaotic.
And the cost of that chaos is, well, it's painfully clear when you hear from the participants. We have this really specific raw account from a participant named Nathaniel Valentino.
Yeah.
His marriage breakdown on the show was a huge plot line, very high drama, great for ratings, and it all ended in this spectacular, tear-soaked dinner party exit that everyone was talking about. But Valentino said that after filming wrapped, things got genuinely dark for him.
He admitted he didn't leave his bed for 2 weeks after the experience. He described this just profound crash in his mental state. He said he was in a great place before the show, but the process required him to be so emotionally available, so constantly involved in conflict, that now he feels he needs therapy. He literally said, "I'm fucked."
Which is just a brutal, honest assessment of the human cost.
It's a brutal trade-off, isn't it?
Yeah.
The production company makes millions of dollars off a person who is now, you know, literally unable to leave his bed and needs professional help.
His mental health became the currency for those 2 million viewers a night.
That's it. And the dilemma for the networks is, How do you continually manufacture those high emotions, that drama, which is what drives the ratings, without causing lasting, demonstrable psychological damage to the people involved?
Which raises the big question, is that chaotic, exploitative model the only way to be successful? I mean, is there actually a market for that kind your TV?
Well, some of our sources argue, and I think pretty convincingly, that there is. There's a strong demand for shows where participants aren't shamed or humiliated, and the audience still gets a huge amount of pleasure from watching.
And the best example for that Condor model seems to be The Traitors.
Absolutely. That show is high stakes, it's full of tension, suspicion, intense emotions. I mean, people break down and cry, they feel betrayed, they feel paranoid.
But, and this is the key difference, those tears and intense emotions, they all stay strictly within the parameters of the game.
That's the crucial difference. The drama comes from strategic elimination, from clever gameplay. It doesn't come from real-life personal heartbreak or broken marriages or, being shamed for your life choices or your appearance.
The emotional distress is tied directly to the competition for money, so the viewer stays focused on the game, not on the individual's personal suffering.
Right. And that distinction drama within the game brings us to this really fascinating academic framework. It's called the paradox and the consumption of authenticity.
Okay, break that down for us.
The idea is that viewers aren't stupid. They know reality TV is a constructive mix of, authentic moments and inauthentic engineered scenarios. So for a show to be successful, it has to achieve what the researchers call satisfying authenticity.
Satisfying authenticity. So what did that mean?
It means the production successfully creates a feeling of reality that justifies why you're watching, even though you know it's fake. And to do that, the show has to successfully negotiate 3 specific inherent paradoxes. This is where your brain, as a viewer, does the heavy lifting of believing in something you know isn't entirely real.
Okay, let's spend some time on these 3 paradoxes. What's the first one?
The first is the situation paradox. This is about reconciling common goals or problems, things we can all relate to, like teamwork, overcoming obstacles, finding love with uncommon, fantastic surroundings.
So relatable struggle, but in a fantasy setting.
Exactly. Think about a classic like Survivor. The goal is totally relatable. Survive, build a team, win $1 million. But the setting has to be extraordinary. As one viewer of the source material pointed out, they prefer Survivor on an uninhabited tropical island. That's the escapist fantasy.
Right.
The Australian outback might be just as real or foreign to the viewer, but it just doesn't satisfy that fantasy element in the same way.
So the human struggle is the anchor, but the exotic, fantastic setting is what makes it entertaining. If it's set too close to home, like, people just sitting on a couch, which is why one viewer said they rejected Big Brother for being too real,
Yeah.
it doesn't have the escapism you need for that satisfying authenticity.
Mm-hmm. The setting has to reinforce a desirable, unachievable fantasy.
Okay, so that's the situation paradox. What's the second one?
The second is the identification paradox. This one's about balancing the idea of seeing people like me with extraordinary traits. You need characters who are relatable enough that the audience can empathize with their struggle, but you also need them to be compelling.
So either extraordinarily beautiful or highly skilled.
Or just pushed into extraordinarily unusual circumstances. It's kind of an aspirational relatability. We want to see ourselves, but, our ideal, most charismatic, best-looking version of ourselves.
The source mentions an example from Temptation Island.
Yeah, that viewers enjoy the fact that the cast members are so beautiful. Those extraordinary traits have to be there to hold your attention. But, and this is crucial, that identification isn't always based on surface-level similarity.
You can have cross-demographic identification.
Absolutely. The source highlights a young African-American male viewer, Charles, who identified deeply with Judy, a 60-year-old white woman on a show. Why? Because they shared similar problems or attitudes towards the game. The relatability is emotional and situational, but the extraordinary visual elements are what draw you in first.
That makes perfect sense. Okay, so the third paradox. You said this one is the most central to our whole thesis about manufactured drama.
Yes, this is the production paradox. And it requires reconciling the unscripted, natural flow of life with the, quote, necessary manipulation that producers provide to make it all watchable.
Right, because if you were just given raw, unedited footage of a survival competition, it would be
watchable. So boring. No one wants to see 2 hours of people trying to build a raft on Survivor or people just sleeping. So the viewer acknowledges, maybe subconsciously, that the producer has to manage the casting edit the footage, and choose interesting scenarios to add entertainment value.
They accept that they're watching reality that has been shaped.
Yes. And this is why the disliked character, the bad guy, is actually essential to the whole experience. The conflict is the price of admission.
One of the viewers in the source material, Shirley, she specifically said she did not want the bad guy character, Jerry, removed from Survivor.
She explicitly said that Jerry made the show interesting. It increased her engagement, made her want to keep watching just to see if Jerry would finally get kicked off.
So disliked characters aren't just an accident. They're a necessary part of the dramatic form. They induce increased audience involvement. The audience is basically in this negotiation. They understand there's manipulation, they accept the exotic setting, and they embrace the difficult, fractious person because that conflict is what makes the show compelling.
And that negotiation is the price the audience pays for satisfying authenticity.
So if satisfying authenticity is achieved through this kind of accepted manipulation, let's really pull back the curtain and look at the production playbook. How does this manipulation actually happen on the ground?
Well, the great TV secret is that unscripted reality TV was never really unscripted.
Not from the beginning.
No. The internal memos from production companies, which are quoted in our sources, they confirm that producers are often directed not just to passively document what's happening, but to actively create entertaining stories. That means they're casting for conflict, they're building storylines in advance, and they're generating the drama they need to fill those time slots.
And this systematic approach to manufacturing drama, it brings us right into a really profound legal gray area, doesn't it? Especially when it comes to the welfare of the participants.
It does. There was a very specific recommendation made to the UK Parliament about the treatment of reality TV participants, and it was striking. It suggested that if participants challenged the production companies in court, judges should not automatically just point to the legal contract they signed as the final word.
So the contract shouldn't be the end of the story.
Exactly. Instead, the recommendation was that judges should examine the specific circumstances around the contract signing, and, crucially, whether the participants were truthfully told what would really happen to them during filming. It's an acknowledgement that the psychological toll and the manipulation methods are often hidden from participants until they're already isolated and locked into the system.
Let's get into the most potent tool for that psychological manipulation, the confessional or talking head interview.
Ah, yes. The segments where the participant looks right down the lens of the camera and tells us how they're really feeling.
But the mechanics they use to fabricate the emotion and the timing they're pretty sophisticated.
They are. The first key element is timing. It's so critical to remember that these confessionals are often filmed days, sometimes even weeks, after the events being discussed actually happened.
Yet it always feels immediate. That's the whole trick, isn't it?
It is. Participants are carefully coached to speak strictly in the present tense. No references to later events or outcomes. This deliberate fabrication of the timeline helps maintain tension and gives the illusion that the reaction is happening in real time, right after the event.
Even though the participant has had 2 weeks to process it, or regret it, or even forget how they initially felt.
And then you have the highly coercive nature of the coaching itself. Producers will often goad participants to get a specific reaction that fits the pre-planned narrative they have in mind.
So they'll just ask the same question over and over again.
Over and over, not just twice, but dozens of times if they need to, just to get a desired emotional take. They might say, "But tell me why that betrayal hurt you so much. Can you say that sentence again, but with more regret?"
Wow.
And this relentless pursuit of a specific line reading can lead to a participant looking visibly exhausted or broken.
And that broken look, the red eyes, the tired voice, we, the audience, we interpret that as genuine remorse or deep guilt. When in reality, it could just be sheer fatigue from being badgered by a producer for hours on end.
Exactly. And to keep this whole narrative structure coherent, the production uses specialized roles called loggers. These are people who monitor the action in real time. They write down everything that happens so they can draft leading questions for those later interviews.
So the commentary they get fits perfectly into a pre-calculated story beat.
Precisely. The character's reaction is predetermined by what the editor wants the outcome to be, not by the character's own internal reality.
And once they have that audio, they move on to editing techniques that are, I think, maybe the most insidious because they fundamentally change the words coming out of a person's mouth.
You're talking about the Frankenbite.
The Frankenbite. It's short for Frankenstein bite, which is a very telling name.
It's an industry term, And it's achieved when audio fragments, sometimes individual syllables or half-words, are spliced together from totally different contexts and different times to create new meanings. They fabricate a quote that the participant never actually said in that way. It creates this powerful sense of linguistic artifice. It's an ethical manipulation of language itself.
The source material has a really chilling example of this from the show Joe Millionaire back in the early 2000s.
Yeah, a female cast member claimed that she was victimized by this technique. The producers creatively edited her words, taking them from different days, and cut them together to suggest she had performed oral sex on the millionaire.
An event which a field producer later confirmed did not actually happen as it was shown on screen.
That just shows you the lengths they'll go to. The entertaining story wins, even at the expense of someone's actual reputation and reality. The resulting scene was a complete fabrication created purely in the editing suite, but delivered to the audience as truth.
Another technique, maybe a bit subtler but just as misleading, is called cheating footage.
Right. This is when they use unrelated surveillance shots or B-roll to visually portray an emotion that someone is talking about. It's a visual lie.
So you might hear the person in the confessional say, "I felt so betrayed and devastated," but the footage they cut to is a wide shot of them leaning against a wall, maybe taken 2 days earlier,
Or even a shot of them looking sad about something totally unrelated.
And that creates this little disconnect, right? The visual cues, the eyes, the posture, they don't quite match the intensity of the words being spoken. The viewer senses something's a little off, and it contributes to that overall feeling that the performance is synthetic.
And we can't forget the more systemic techniques of environmental manipulation of affect. To get those raw, broken emotional reactions, producers will intentionally create these high-pressure environments. Sometimes they even mirror techniques used in psychological experiments, all to deplete the participant and extract raw human emotions for the ratings.
We're talking about really basic biological and psychological stressors here.
Oh yeah. Methods include depriving people of sleep, keeping them in isolation during pre-game phases, and notoriously providing copious amounts of wine and coffee before they're subjected to these grueling hours-long interview sessions.
So by the time they're asked to reflect on something or apologize, they're already in a state of physical and emotional depletion.
And that exhaustion is then carefully edited to look like genuine remorse or deep shame rather than the simple result of physical duress and lack of sleep.
And finally, this deception extends way beyond the main action. It goes into the metagame of competitive shows like Survivor, contestants engaging in pre-gaming, making alliances before the show even starts is strictly forbidden.
But everyone knows it happens.
And it's basically unenforceable because it's all verbal and happens off camera.
Right. Some contestants get cagey when you ask about it. They say, oh, we're not supposed to do that. But the really strategic players, they just embrace it as a necessary part of the deception you need to win the game.
The examples are just incredible. Like Camila Cartagesu, who intentionally withheld details of a prior alliance in her exit interviews because she was trying to play up a fake rivalry for her anticipated return on a future season.
She realized that deception wasn't just useful in the game, but in controlling her public narrative in the media cycle itself.
Or the example of Christian Hubicki, the robotics educator. He concealed the existence of his 6-week-old baby, Michael, kept the birth a secret from the public, even some family, hoping to reveal the baby as a secret weapon at the final tribal council.
Just imagine the dedication required to keep that secret for months, knowing that your greatest personal joy is your secret weapon on a TV show. It just illustrates the intense, calculated lengths contestants will go to control their narrative. He wanted to appear as the goofy robotics professor, not the devoted family man.
So we've seen how the camera and the editor can manipulate reality and emotion, but this control doesn't just stop when the cameras are off. It's legally mandated. It's enshrined in a formal legal document.
Which brings us to the morality clause.
The morality clause, also known as a morals, personal conduct, or good conduct clause. It's a staple in entertainment contracts, endorsement deals, even academic contracts, and it's the most powerful tool for institutional image control.
And these clauses are written to be incredibly broad and vague. That's by design. They'll ban acts that generally offend notions of decency and morality or any conduct that might bring the university or corporation into disrepute.
They're almost circular in their logic.
They're often tautological, which gives the company maximum subjective flexibility in how they interpret it. And the purpose is purely one-sided.
It gives the company the unilateral right to just terminate the agreement instantly if a participant's behavior causes perceived damage to their reputation.
And that legal mandate is why the public apology is so essential for survival. For a reality star or an athlete caught in a scandal, a DUI, a public fight, the morality clause effectively mandates an apology.
They have to appear sufficiently remorseful to satisfy the public, and more importantly, the advertisers who are funding the show.
If the network decides the apology isn't good enough, or it's not convincing, or it's too late, they can just terminate the contract. No compensation.
So the apology becomes a literal, legally enforced career survival mechanism. It's not about genuine contrition at all.
It's about meeting a contractual obligation to mitigate PR damage. The sources give this high-profile example of how fast and definitively these clauses are enforced. A college football coach was arrested for domestic battery.
Right. And while his private dispute had little to do with his coaching on the field,
The fact that ESPN cameras recorded his booking and broadcast it nationally meant his actions had a catastrophic, immediate impact on the university's role model image and its ability to recruit.
and because that negative media coverage was so national and so severe, the morality clause was deemed enforceable. The argument was that he's a high-profile figurehead, a leader, and his private actions now represent the institution to the public. He violated the disrepute clause.
But what's truly staggering about these clauses is the inherent lack of mutuality.
This is key.
It is. Morality clauses impose this really strict duty on the talent to be moral and PR friendly. But that duty is almost never reciprocal.
So wait, even if the company itself gets into a massive scandal, the talent is generally just trapped. That imbalance is incredible.
It absolutely is. The talent typically cannot terminate the contract if the company is tainted by scandal, a huge product recall, accusations of corporate crime. The power imbalance is stark. The stronger party, the employer, unilaterally controls the other party's behavior.
And because it's an employer's market, people who get offered a job are highly unlikely to contest a good behavior provision.
Yeah.
They have an optimism bias, right? They think, oh, I'm not going to behave badly.
Right, they don't think it'll ever be used against them.
Silly.
Even though history shows it happens all the time. And this lack of mutuality became a huge problem after all those massive corporate failures that shook public faith. Which brings us to a major aha moment for our listener.
The reverse morals clause. This is the talent's countermove.
This provision is designed specifically to protect the talent from the bad actions of the company they're endorsing. It's reputation insurance, and it has a fascinating history.
It goes way back.
The first known successful negotiation of this clause was by the celebrity Pat Boone, way back in 1968. Boone had this iconic, religious, clean-cut image. He was the good Elvis.
Right.
And when a record company used nude photos on a record jacket without his consent, it just profoundly offended his core beliefs and damaged his brand.
So because he had leverage and made his faith non-negotiable, he was able to negotiate a clause that allowed him to sever ties with the company when their actions contradicted his public image.
It established the principle that the talent's reputation also deserves protection from their business partner. And the necessity for this clause has just exploded in the modern era because of the profound erosion of public trust in corporate America.
You think about the 2008 financial crisis, the scandal over the AIG executive bonuses while they were being bailed out by taxpayers.
All the huge Ponzi schemes like Bernie Madoff. In those cases, major financial institutions lost all credibility. The SEC publicly apologized for their failures. Corporate reputation just tanked, and no celebrity wanted their brand attached to that level of systemic deceit.
So the reverse morals clause became vital.
It's now a crucial mechanism. It allows talent to terminate an agreement if the company engages in immoral or financially irresponsible conduct or files for bankruptcy. It mitigates what the sources call damaged consumer evaluation of both entities after a public link has been established. It's the talent saying, I refuse to be collateral damage to your systemic failure.
Okay, so we've established that public apologies are often legally mandated, structurally manufactured, and designed purely for image repair. Let's move into the psychology of why the audience is so incredibly cynical about them. When a public figure performs contrition, why do we so rarely believe it?
Our skepticism isn't irrational. It's actually psychologically and empirically justified. We have a study that analyzed 32 public apologies on YouTube between 2009 and 2014, along with almost 2,000 audience responses. The findings were pretty explosive.
What did the research find?
There was a striking lack of evidence
Yeah.
that our perceptions of sincerity and forgiveness were related to either the verbal apology strategies, the actual words being used, or the actor's expression of emotions, the sad face and the tears.
Wait, so the content of the apology and the actor's dramatic performance, they didn't really matter. What did the audience actually focus on?
The content of the audience comments. The majority of them focused overwhelmingly on the established reputation of the public figure. That was the factor most strongly associated with perceptions of sincerity.
So if you already thought the person was a bad actor, you saw the apology as insincere.
And if you already had a positive view of them, you were forgiving. The audience is essentially using the apology as a vehicle to confirm their pre-existing biases about the person, rather than judging the apology on its own merits.
It's confirmation bias in real time.
But we can still identify the verbal strategies that immediately signal insincerity, the ones that feed into that existing cynicism.
Like what?
Well, things like reducing the offensiveness of the action, minimizing the victim's experience or the impact of what they did. Also, the combination of denial and evasion, where they refuse to take ownership. And, of course, the widespread use of non-apology features.
The classic non-apology apology.
I'm sorry if you're offended. Precisely. 50% of the apologies they analyzed contain those features. Offering a vague acknowledgement, minimizing the offense, or phrasing the apology as conditional, just like you said. It shifts the blame onto the receiver's emotional state, not the giver's behavior.
This moves us into the really fascinating paradox of nonverbal performance. Because if the words are often fake, you'd think the sad face, the eye contact, the body language, that must communicate true remorse, right?
It's a compelling idea, but the research really complicates it. The analysis showed that nonverbal sadness was the most common emotion expressed. It was in 2/3 of the apology videos. But the regression analyses found no significant effect of any facial expression, sadness, fear, anger, whatever, on either perceived sincerity or forgiveness.
So the audience expects the sadness, but it's irrelevant to our judgment of whether it's genuine because we just assume it's being performed.
That's the core conclusion. And to understand why, you have to distinguish between a sincere apology, which reflects genuine recognition of fault, and an instrumental apology.
An instrumental one being made purely to avoid punishment.
To avoid rejection, contractual termination, public punishment. Exactly. They're acting remorseful to achieve a goal. And studies on nonverbal behavior showed a key difference. High public-performing individuals are more likely to use direct gaze and clear facial displays of sadness, specifically in instrumental apologies. They are performing the feeling because they know it's expected.
They know how to deploy the cues of sadness on command.
Whereas low public-performing individuals actually showed more gaze avoidance when they were delivering a sincere apology. It suggests genuine discomfort or shame or embarrassment. So the better someone is at public performance, the more likely they are to deploy these dramatic, perfect, nonverbal cues when they are, in fact, not genuinely sorry. The performance is inverted.
And that structural gap between the perfectly performed remorse and the strategic goal, that brings us back to the psychological concept of the uncanny valley.
The uncanny valley is that feeling of, profound creeping discomfort we get when something is almost human but fundamentally wrong, like the rigid body movements or delayed blinks in a bad CGI character.
So in public apologies, the instrumental nature creates nonverbal leakage and facial desynchronization.
Right. We're talking about microexpressions here. It's the eyes that are wet, but the mouth doesn't match the emotion, or the blink that comes a fraction of a second too late. That slight desynchronization where different parts of the face aren't registering the emotion coherently, that's what triggers our visceral skepticism. It makes the hyper-polished, perfectly delivered performance feel instantly synthetic.
And we see this exact same perception in how we evaluate AI-generated messages.
If a participant in a study gets a supportive note after a difficult situation, and then they're told that note was generated by an AI, the perceived authenticity just drops off a cliff.
Because there was no human thought, no effort, no feeling that went into it.
Right. The emotional intentionality is gone. But crucially, the same drop in authenticity happened when the note was attributed to an unknown human, like an anonymous florist. It underscores that social distance, whether it's algorithmic or human, fundamentally erodes our perception of genuineness, especially in emotionally sensitive contexts like an apology.
Okay, so let's just list off some of the common recurring image repair features we see in YouTube apologies all the time, the ones that just continually fuel this audience skepticism because they're so predictable.
First, you've got defeasibility. That's pleading a lack of knowledge or control. The celebrity says, "I didn't know that term was racist when I posted it," Or, I didn't know that photo would be offensive.
It's a strategy to argue they can't be held accountable because of their ignorance. It's not, I'm bad, it's, I was just ignorant. It deflects the moral blame.
Second, seeking sympathy. This is when they share completely unrelated details about a difficult childhood or family trauma, or being in a bad place emotionally at the time of the offense.
Yeah.
It's a strategy to make the audience feel sorry for them, even though their personal history has no direct connection to what they actually did.
And then there's the most blatant one, the one that just instantly shreds any perception of sincerity.
The commercialization of contrition.
Ugh.
This is ending a supposedly heartfelt emotional apology by subtly or overtly promoting their channel, advertising their merch, or plugging their latest vlog. The instant the camera cuts to a link to buy a hoodie, the audience knows the whole performance was just a cynical attempt to redirect attention and profit from the scandal.
Okay, so this is where it gets really interesting. To understand the modern media landscape, we have to recognize that this manufacturing of authenticity isn't just about the celebrity's performance or the editor's cuts. It's about deep systemic protection of the powerful.
Absolutely. The sources reveal that for years, powerful figures in TV and entertainment were just institutionally protected. Allegations of misconduct were routinely treated by HR systems as isolated incidents, single complaints, rather than being recognized as part of a broader pattern of habitual misconduct.
The structures were designed for containment, not for resolution. When Matt Lauer was fired in 2017, the speed of it stunned the audience. But we now know that internal concerns about his behavior had been circulating for years, handled quietly and routed through confidential processes that prioritize the institution over accountability.
His dismissal was just the tipping point when the institutional tolerance for risk finally ran out. But the system had protected him for a very long time. And we saw the same tragic pattern with Bill Cosby. His America's Dad image endured for decades because allegations against him were just dismissed, ignored, or minimized until investigative reporting of the 2010s gave them collective visibility.
The information was there, but it was sidelined by a system designed to protect the revenue source. Accountability only came when the institution couldn't afford the association anymore.
For Jeremy Clarkson's firing from Top Gear, the decision came after a formal BBC investigation that explicitly considered his extensive prior conduct, including earlier public warnings. The final incident was just the final breach. Similarly, the end of House of Cards became structurally impossible after allegations against the lead required them to throw out the scripts and rebuild the whole show at the 11th hour.
This brings us to a really compelling modern case study in this kind of narrative control and audience awareness. The Vanderpump Rules scandal, Scandival.
Yes. The audience, now hyper-aware of production techniques, became meta-aware of the deception as it was unfolding. The scandal broke outside of filming, and the show's production just seemed to scramble in real time to adjust the narrative.
You could see it happening. Audience members immediately noticed they were trying to control the story, removing pro-villain promo clips that had been released or giving these fluffy softball interviews to certain cast members to try and soften their public image.
And what's fascinating is how the unremorseful star, Tom Sandoval, was deploying his own aggressive legal and PR strategies, acting as if the morality clause was just a negotiation point.
In his legal filing against the victim, Raquel Levez, he argued this maximalist defense. He claimed she failed to mitigate whatever damages she suffered.
Which is essentially blaming her for not being more emotionally resilient.
Right. And even more aggressively, he argued that her status as a public figure should relinquish her right to privacy because the public has a legitimate interest in the lives of reality stars.
That's a maximalist approach to image repair. He's trying to shift the blame to the victim's carelessness while claiming her public status justifies the violation of her privacy. It just underscores how little genuine contrition is often present when an apology is just a contractual necessity.
And all of these conflicting narratives, the manufactured drama, the participants' real suffering, the network's damage control, they all collide in one place.
The reunion episode.
Fans anticipate them like the Super Bowl, and they heighten the illusion of reality more than anything else.
They're heavily produced, heavily edited, but they serve as this critical opportunity for contestants to rehabilitate their images. The reunion is their chance to counteract the narratives of their season, to try and tell their side of the story, and rewrite how they were portrayed by the editors. It's the moment the star tries to seize back control of their own manufactured reality.
Finally, we can look at two really high-profile crisis management strategies that prove there's more than one way to attempt image repair and narrative control after a scandal.
First, you have strategic silence, which is exemplified by Serena Williams. After she got criticism for doing a crip-walk dance at the 2012 Olympics, she refused any reactive messaging. She just focused on her career, let the controversy die down, and avoided that uncanny valley of apology completely.
And the strength of that strategy was revealed years later, wasn't it?
Yeah. In the 2024 Super Bowl, she reclaimed the moment on her own terms, performed the dance again, recontextualized it as a proud expression of culture, and effectively dictated her own narrative years after the fact.
And the second strategy is the carefully orchestrated comeback, which Will Smith used after the 2022 Oscars incident.
His initial apology video was criticized for being too polished, too long, too performative. It fell right into that uncanny valley we were talking about. But that wasn't the end of the strategy.
His team used that initial heavily controlled performance as a launch pad, and then they followed it up by just diving back into major high-profile projects like Emancipation and a new Bad Boys film. The strategy was to use sustained, high-quality professional work to incrementally shift the public narrative over time.
So that his professional contributions would eventually outweigh the memory of the personal incident.
So, after all this, what does it all mean for you, the person listening, sitting at home, watching the latest dramatic meltdown on your screen? Fully aware that it might be a Frankenbite from 3 weeks ago.
Well, I mean, it means we've seen that the reality we consume is not passively captured. It's meticulously constructed. It's built from technical artifice, emotional coercion in those coached confessionals, and legal mandates enforced by morality clauses that are all about career preservation.
Your deep, immediate cynicism about public apologies. It's not irrational. It is psychologically and legally justified. Because too often, those apologies are purely instrumental performances aimed at avoiding getting fired and satisfying advertisers, not genuine moral reconciliation.
We now know that the content of the apology matters far less than the audience's pre-existing confirmed opinion of that person's character. The structural nature of modern television almost necessitates this insincerity. The network needs the drama to survive. The participant needs to perform remorse to keep their job.
And the audience, armed with this awareness of the entire mechanism of manipulation, watches anyway, demanding ever higher stakes.
Which leaves us with this final provocative thought for you to consider long after this deep dive ends. The most authentic thing about modern media might actually be the audience's ability to spot the structural inevitability of insincerity. The fact that we tune in knowing the drama is manufactured, yet we still engage with the emotional turmoil as if it were real.
So if we enjoy the engineered suffering that we know costs people their mental health and reputations, does that willing engagement make us, the viewers, complicit in the exploitative bargain?